Okay, our next speaker is Earl Yager. Yay, Earl. Hi, Earl. Hi. And Earl will be talking about the gamification of education.
There it goes. All right. So gamification of education. So taking the idea and the concepts of games and applying them to the classroom. So what is gamification of education? So gamification in general, not necessarily specific to education, is the taking of game concepts, game ideas, and bringing them into non-game context. So you're going to take them out of games and take those things that make games fun and bring them back into games. So what is gamification? That was, thinking about the way our students play games. When you start looking at kids playing games, when you're looking at kids playing games, what do you see when you watch them? You see that they are intense, happy, excited, sometimes frustrated, but more than anything else, you always notice that they are engaged in what they're doing. When kids are playing games, they're engaged in that activity. It has their full attention when they're playing a game. So if games can be so engaging, if games can capture our students' attention, how can we use this to motivate them? How can we use this to change their behaviors? And how are other people doing this as well? So let me give you an example here.
I like to call the group of people who are really driving this trend forward Generation G. And there are 126 million millennials in the United States and the EU, plus younger kids who we can't yet count, that form Generation G. And what Generation G is different, in the way that Generation G is different from X, Y, and all the different generations that we may belong to, is that video games are the primary form of entertainment that Generation G is consuming. It is their primary form of entertainment. And this is already starting to have a tremendous effect on society. All around us, Generation G's desire for game-like experiences is reshaping industries. From Foursquare, which caused the mobile social networking ecosystem to actually start, to companies like Nike, and Coke and Chase, and also, of course, Zynga, which owes much of its success to games. The trend that underlies this whole pattern is called gamification, and it's a word that many of you, I'm sure, have heard. And a simple definition of gamification is it's the process of using game thinking and game mechanics to engage audiences and solve problems. Part of the reason why gamification has become such an emergent topic right now is because of Generation G's effect on culture and society already. Their expectations are different. Some examples of gamification that you may have seen that are really fascinating to me are the emergence of in-dash games in cars. Today, if you buy a hybrid or plug-in electric vehicle, you will almost certainly see the product of $100 million worth of tooling and research and development in the form of a Tamagotchi-style game in a dashboard designed to make you a more ecological driver. It is a simple most of the game mechanics are very simple. A plant grows as you drive more ecologically and withers if you don't, like those virtual pets, Tamagotchi. This is an example of, gamification at work. Another really interesting example is a thing called Speed Camera Lottery, designed by Kevin Richardson, based in San Francisco, works for MTV. Awesome guy. And this is the concept in Speed Camera Lottery. You know those speeding cameras that you pass by and they take your picture and send you a ticket? So in many Scandinavian countries, the ticket that you get is actually based not on how fast you were going, but how much money you make. So the more you make, the bigger the ticket. So Kevin re-engineered a speeding camera in Sweden that instead of just giving tickets to people who drive over the speed limit that pass the camera, anybody who drives under the limit is entered into a lottery to win the proceeds of the people who speed. It is game thinking, that term I described earlier, the core foundation of gamification. It is game thinking in its purest and most beautiful form. Take a big negative reinforcement loop and turn it into a small incremental positive reinforcement loop. It had the effect of dropping speed by over 20% at the point of intervention.
Obviously, game thinking can impact us, can change our behavior, can change the way we think about things and the way we react to things. So taking that game thinking and applying it to education is one of the ways in which we can start modifying our classroom, start bringing this concept into our classroom. So what can we look at games and see what they have? So games are based around a point system. At the core of every game is some kind of a point system. And you score more points the more you play. That's the way these games work. Now, they also have some tangential associations to other ideas. You might have levels. Once you earn a certain number of points, you get to a certain point and you gain a level, or maybe you're on a leaderboard, and you may be familiar with leaderboards from the old arcade-style games. They had the top 10 players or the top 20 players showing on those. That's a leaderboard. Challenges. A lot of games these days have unlockable things, or things that you have to puzzle through to get that extra bonus. It may not be in the main storyline of the game, but it's some extra thing that if you do, you get awards for it, you get rewarded for it. Most games today have social elements, and that's actually why most people play games, is for the social aspect of it. So having social elements is a key point. And then also status. There's bragging rights. There's what you have achieved within the game, being able to tell other people that I have made it to a certain point in game. That's always something that people look for. So taking these concepts forward, let's look at some ideas on how they might be applied.
Now, we're using a grading system that is essentially demotivational and sets up a reinforcing feedback loop for failure. Today's students first walk into a classroom or approach new assignments thinking of themselves as having an A+, at least subconsciously, and from there, with every mistake, there's nowhere to go but down. We need to recontextualize grading. In games, we've learned that progress encourages progress, and the human desire for efficiency is a far stronger motivator than the fear of falling further from one's goal. To this end, if you simply make all assignments worth points, let's call them experience for a lark, have all students start at 0 XP and always gain points as they go, continuously progressing towards clear and tangible levels, each with their own benefits. Each assignment and each test feels rewarding rather than disheartening. It's more fun to gain stuff than to lose it. Additionally, this methodology never leaves a student at a point where they feel like they should just give up. The best part is that you don't even have to change anything about the way you already grade the class to do this. You'd still have the same total number of possible points the class was worth, and you divide them in the same manner that we normally divvy up letter grades. All you're doing is counting upwards instead of down, and corresponding the letter grades to levels as you go. Lee Sheldon did a basic version of this for his class at Indiana University, and found it to be highly effective. The only thing I felt that he could have done more was to give the kids skills as they leveled. Without them, the different grading was just an arbitrary reward system that didn't provide real value to the students, and didn't highlight the inherent value of education. If you were instead to give students pickable powers every level, and set up class-wide achievements, you could teach lessons within the game system itself. Say you set up class-wide achievements, such as, if one student gets 25,000 experience, the whole class gets a free bonus 100 XP. Or, say 5 students get to 15,000 experience, the whole class gets bonus points. Or maybe a field trip or something, whatever you prefer. With this sort of reward system, you encourage the whole class to be rooting for one another, and you encourage the best students to help out their classmates. You encourage your students to function with camaraderie and as a team. The best kids can't get the maximum possible score unless they help their peers pull up their grades. And at the same time, the kids who are struggling, rather than resenting their classmates who are doing well, are cheering them on because other kids succeeding is going to help their own grade.
So leveraging a lot of these game concepts will build teamwork type thinking into your class. If as a team the class achieves certain things, the whole class benefits, everybody's going to encourage those even top performers to push harder, to push themselves further. A lot of times our top performers kind of rest on the laurels. They know that they've already got this in the bag. Why do they push harder? Why should they go any further? Well, if they know that if they get that next level, it helps everybody, and maybe it gives us a benefit that we all want in class, that's a reason to keep pushing. So there's a lot of different ways you can motivate and encourage students. One of the things that was at the beginning of this that you may not have caught, it was they were talking about how a lot of times in our classrooms we start with the idea of you start at 100 points and everyone's got an A in my class. Well, what we don't realize we're telling our kids is you're at the top right now and there's only one way you can go is down. So we're kind of demotivating our kids from the get-go, saying, you're never going to be as good as you are today in my class again. And that's really not what we're wanting. And so games kind of flip that thinking on its head. You start at no points. Everyone starts at the bottom, and everyone gains. Some may gain faster than others because their performance is better and quicker than others. But everyone gains. And so maybe you need to do it a little bit more slowly to get there, but you're going to get there just like everybody else. Another thing that's common in games and game thinking is failure is not stigmatized in games. In games, if you fail, you just try again. You play that same level as many times as you want. However, in our classrooms, if you fail, that's really bad. If you failed an assignment, you might get to retake it, or you might have some alternatives, but in all likelihood, that's permanently penalized you in some way. In games, that doesn't happen. So how can we use that in our classroom? Well, in our classroom, if you give them multiple different assignments and they just have to get to a certain point threshold before they get to the next level, they may fail several assignments and they may not get enough points on any one of them. But if they do all of the assignments and continue to do extra assignments, they'll get there. Now, some students may pass right away and they may not need all of the assignment options. Some, however, might. And so you have different ways that you can build up points and allow students to score higher and higher as they go through your class. So it's not enough just to think about implementing these elements, though, because there's a lot of ways in which they can be implemented badly, that they can cause problems, that they may disincentivize rather than encourage students. So what are some of the problems you might run into?
Remember the olden days of walking up to a video arcade machine in the old brown cabinets, and you'd walk up and the first thing that you would see is a leaderboard of 10 people with astronomically high scores, right? Like, Jeff, 10,487,642, right? And then the next person would be like 1 point below that, and then the next person would be like 2 points below that, and you'd be like, you know, and it was actually, one thing that we learned from those leaderboard days was how humongous of a disincentive a poorly designed leaderboard can be. Bad leaderboards are terrible, terrible disincentives. Bad scoring systems are terrible disincentives. You walk up, you see that, and you're like, I'm never getting on that leaderboard. And if you're in any way competitive, in any way, or achievement-oriented, and the game is inherently achievement-oriented, you're like, well, I'm not even going to play this game. I'm going to go look for a machine where I can maybe get on the board, right? I'm going to look for a game where I can get on the board. So we've revamped leaderboard design in the context of social games. Here's how leaderboards should be designed now. It's actually like that prescriptive. Okay, so in the new design of leaderboards, you put the user right in the middle. And you put their next two best friends above them and their next two best friends below that, right? So no matter where they are in the actual rankings, they're in the middle. 2 friends above, 2 friends below, with a little dialogue bubble that says, in order to beat Sue, do this. Right? It's so much better of a design. It turns out to be so much more engaging than the old leaderboard design. And the only exception to that, and this is important as well because I think this kind of goes against some of the core web design hegemony, which is that you actually think through different use cases and explicitly redesign experiences for different users. So the exception to that design is if the user is actually in the top 20, literally in the top 20, you show literally the top 20, right? Because that user probably then really cares that they're in the top 20 and wants to see the top 20, right?
And so he's talking about situations where you have large groups of people playing the same game. But if you're in a classroom of maybe 35 or less students, 40 or less students, being in the top 20 is not as meaningful. So if in a classroom environment, if you're in the top 5, maybe the top 10, you may want to show exactly where they are in the ranking system. But otherwise, you may want to show in a more general sense, like he was saying. Put them in the middle with a couple of people above and a couple of people below. Now, you don't have to use real student names. In many games, you have an avatar. You have some character that you're playing, and you can have a code name for that character. We could do the same in class. And so people don't have to know exactly who they're just a couple points behind or who they're just a couple of points ahead of. But you can use this as a methodology of saying, you know, you're almost there. You've almost beat one more person. And for that achievement-oriented student who wants that ability to beat another student, and some people, that's what they're playing for. They play games because they want to win. So if that's what they're playing for, they can use that as an incentive to move up to the next level. Other things to think about when designing a game out of your classroom.
Hello, my name is Mr. Anderson, and my class is a video game. So what I want you to do is grab an iPad. I want you to log into Biohazard 5. I want you to watch a video, I want you to do some reading, I want you to take a quiz, and then I want you to head off into the class. Now, if I would have done this with my students' parents, it would have been the most frustrating day of my life. But the kids grew up with this technology, and the technology today simply works, and so they were headed off on their own. And so my class is a learning classroom. If you were to come in, you would find kids reading, watching videos, applying, doing special activities, trying to solve challenges, working together or working alone. And so it's a really neat, I had a teacher come and we were just talking about halfway through the class and he said, what you've created is like a shop class. Because he was a shop teacher at once and he said, so as a shop teacher, you teach them some skills and then the kids can apply that. And so it's like that. I would love to keep telling you about how great it is. How the test scores seem to be going up, and how the kids are learning how to learn independently. But I am a science teacher, and that's not what gets us excited. In science, what gets us excited is discovering something new. And so I want to talk about 3 ways that I failed. Number one, a conventional classroom is like a school bus where all the students log in, they just get on, and the teacher is like the bus driver, and it drives from point A to point B, and you can make sure that all the students get there. And so what I had done is I had given each of them a brand new car, keys, and I said, drive. And so some of them stalled out, and some of them raced ahead, and some of them drove right into a wall. And so I need to give them more scaffolding next year. The next thing I learned is the importance of reading. Kids struggled with reading when you make your class independent. And I should have seen this coming because it's the biggest indicator of success. And I think the reason I didn't see it coming is that I had never stopped talking, because that's what good teachers do. We read the book, and then we come up with really good examples, and then we present it in a dynamic way, and the kids can just sit there, and then they can learn it. Why would they want to read the book? We read it for them. And so when I force them to read the book, a lot of them struggled, and we've had to work with that. The last thing I learned is that we are not Vulcans. In the most recent Star Trek movie, young Spock sits in a little module, and he's surrounded by computer screens, and the computer keeps throwing questions at him in philosophy and relativity, and that's his school day. He just sits in a little module like that. And so a lot of people think that they can change education by somehow using videos or automating the learning process. That sucks. Who would want to be in a school like that? Kids are coming to school to be social. And so I had to add elements of social learning in my class to make it more compelling.
Okay, so designing your implementation is important. Thinking through how people are going to act and interact with the game system that you're developing is an important part of gamification. There are actually 4 different player types that you see when you do studies on games. I'm running short on time, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with these, but there's achievers, explorers, socialites, and killers. They each are a different kind of player type. This is called Bartle's player types. If you do a search on that, you can find out more information about it. But the one I wanted to point out most is socialites. 80% of people who play games play it for the social aspect. So if you're building gamification into your classroom, if you're gamifying your classroom, make sure you build in social pieces. And how you can do that is you can have group challenges in your classroom that cannot be completed by one person alone. And so that adds in those social elements that people are looking for when they're playing games. Okay? So, and if you're concerned that your topic area, your content area, is not something that's engaging to the students to play as a game, that it wouldn't really work well designed as a game, consider some of these cases.
How many of you in the audience recognize some of the things up on the board right now? Any of them? Okay? These are some of the top-selling games of the last 5 years. And they include, I'm not kidding, being a nail technician, diapering a baby, being a waitress, running a farm, being an air traffic controller, which, as many of you know, is the highest suicide, highest stress position in the entire world. I mean, if you had come into a game publisher 5 years ago and said, I've got a great idea. We're going to make a game where you play an air traffic controller. Planes could crash. What do you think? Sound good? Right? You'd have been laughed out of the room. That doesn't sound like fun. That doesn't sound like fun at all. It highlights a really important conclusion, which is fun and the theme of the thing which are fun are actually not connected. If you've been in a casino before and you've seen the Oprah Winfrey branded slot machine and the Harley Davidson branded slot machine and the neutral slot machine, you all, as science-oriented people, are aware the slot machine acts on your brain the exact same way. Once you choose to sit down in front of that slot machine, same behavior in your brain, same engagement loop, same reaction. Ding, 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 oh yay, ding, 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 right? It's the same thing. It doesn't matter which brand is on the front of the slot machine. Theme is a lure to bring people in to an engaging experience. It's a lure. And that has important implications. That means if air traffic control can be fun, my friends, anything can be fun.
So don't worry about whether or not your content area lends itself well to a game. You can gamify it either way. You can add game elements into it no matter what. So the last thing I want to leave you with, no matter what else you do, go have fun with your students because they're going to appreciate it. Thank you.